On the 19th of August, 2026, Christine Lagarde stood in front of the World Economic Forum's International Business Council in Geneva and delivered what may be the starkest warning of her ECB presidency. She said Europe's post-war growth model is eroding, and it is unlikely to return to the form we once knew. That is not political rhetoric. It is an admission that the foundations of European prosperity, built on cheap energy, open trade, and a predictable global order, are breaking. Lagarde then sharpened the point: Europe largely missed out on the first digital revolution, and we cannot afford to repeat that experience with artificial intelligence, the second digital revolution. As of today, Wednesday the 26th of August, 2026, her words are still reverberating through markets and policy circles. This is not a routine economic update. This is a warning that the European economy is facing a structural test, not a cyclical one. 6 days after those remarks, on the 24th of August, Swiss newspaper NZZ am Sonntag reported that Lagarde has indicated she is ready to serve as the next head of the World Economic Forum after her ECB term ends in October 2027. The report describes her as a putative candidate and says she told a WEF board meeting she was ready to serve. The WEF board has not made a final decision. But the timing matters. It means the ECB president is not just describing Europe's problems from a distance. She may be positioning herself for a global role that depends on convincing leaders to act. That creates something rare, a central banker whose warnings come with a personal transition attached. It also raises questions about whether her final year at the ECB will produce bolder policy pressure on governments, because her legacy is now tied to whether Europe changes course before the AI race leaves it behind. The pressure is already visible in three hard numbers. First, more than 2,500 trade restrictions were implemented globally from January to October 2025. Europe's export-heavy economy is unusually exposed to that fragmentation. Second, China now competes directly with the euro area in close to 40% of sectors where Europe has a comparative advantage, up from around 25% in the early 2000s. That is not just low-cost manufacturing. It is advanced sectors where Europe used to be the clear leader. Third, energy prices remain a structural wound. In 2025, EU electricity prices for energy-intensive industries averaged more than twice US levels and about 50% above China. That means every factory, data center, and chemical plant faces a permanent cost disadvantage before it even starts. Despite these pressures, the euro area economy grew 1.5% in 2025, driven entirely by domestic demand. The second quarter of 2026 posted 0.4% growth, also supported by domestic demand. That domestic resilience is keeping Europe afloat, but it does not solve the external competitiveness problem. The growth figures look better than the underlying story. The euro area expanded by 1.5% in 2025, driven entirely by domestic demand. The second quarter of 2026 continued that pattern with 0.4% quarter-on-quarter growth and positive domestic contribution. Consumer spending and services are holding up. But here is the risk: domestic resilience can mask external decline. If wages and public spending keep the economy moving, politicians may feel less pressure to fix competitiveness. Meanwhile, the structural disadvantages in energy and technology persist. This is a classic example of a good cyclical picture hiding a bad structural one. Lagarde's warning is aimed precisely at this complacency. She is telling leaders that relying on internal demand is not a growth strategy. It is a temporary stabilizer. Once the global AI race accelerates, the cost of delayed structural reform will be much higher. Lagarde's central insight is that European size does not automatically become European scale. The numbers support her. Euro area firms are expected to allocate around 9% of total investment to artificial intelligence in 2026. That sounds meaningful, but it is not enough if innovative companies cannot stay and grow. By their 10th year, EU scale-ups have raised roughly 50% less capital than comparable US firms, specifically those based in San Francisco. That funding gap forces ambitious founders to look abroad. Around 12% of EU scale-ups have relocated outside the EU, primarily to the United States. The pattern is self-reinforcing. If the best AI and technology firms leave, they take talent, intellectual property, and future tax revenue with them. Europe then becomes a place where ideas are born but not scaled. Lagarde is arguing that this is a policy failure, not an accident. The single market exists on paper, but real barriers in capital markets, regulation and services still make it too difficult to grow across borders. So what does Lagarde actually want? Her phrase is precise, turning European size into European scale. She argues that would help innovative firms grow at home, allow new technologies to spread faster and boost productivity. In practice, that means finishing the capital markets union, so European savings can fund European startups instead of flowing into US treasuries and venture funds. It means simplifying regulations so a company licensed in France can operate seamlessly in Germany, Italy, and Poland. And it means using public procurement and infrastructure investment to create a genuine home market for AI. Lagarde also stressed that Europe must make better use of the scale of its home market to support investment, innovation, and productivity. This is not a call for protectionism. It is a call for internal integration. The ECB can only do so much with interest rates. Structural change has to come from governments. That is the uncomfortable message for political leaders who prefer to blame external shocks. Looking ahead, the near-term outlook depends on whether Lagarde's warning translates into policy action before the AI cycle matures. The data points to a narrowing window. China is already direct competition in 40% of Europe's comparative advantage sectors. Energy costs are structurally higher. The scale-up funding gap remains at roughly 50%. If those trends continue, Europe risks becoming a consumer of AI rather than a producer. Lagarde herself framed the first digital revolution as a missed opportunity. The second digital revolution, AI, is moving faster and with larger capital requirements. The ECB's own analysis implies that the euro area can still grow through domestic demand, but that is a cushion, not a strategy. The question for the next 12 months is whether European leaders respond with concrete integration measures or repeat the pattern of summits and speeches. The 24th of August report about Lagarde's WEF future adds another layer. If she becomes WEF head, her influence may shift from monetary policy to the global forum itself. But Europe's structural problems will remain urgent long before any transition in October 2027. The takeaway from Lagarde's Geneva remarks is uncomfortable but clear. Europe is not facing a typical slowdown. Its post-war growth model, cheap energy, open trade, and stable demand, is eroding. The statistics are not abstract. More than 2,500 trade restrictions, China moving into 40% of Europe's advantage sectors, electricity prices at twice US levels, and a scale-up funding gap of 50% are all expressions of the same structural break. Lagarde's message is that Europe cannot wait for the old model to return. It has to create a new one by turning its continental size into genuine scale. That is the only way to compete in artificial intelligence and prevent another lost digital revolution. As of Wednesday, the 26th of August, 2026, the warning has been delivered. What happens next depends on whether European governments treat it as a crisis or just another conference.